Okay, there we
Mike
go.
Lobsinger, good morning.
Good morning, Trevor. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For the listener, you are the VP of Eco-Flecx Rubber Solutions. What is Eco-Flecx Rubber Solutions?
So the company's official name is Champagne Edition. We operate as under the trade name of Eco-Flecx. It's a 30-year-old. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary in November. 30-year-old manufacturing company, and it takes used tires and recycles them and creates many products out of them. And our products are all over the world. As you can imagine, 30 years, you get to kind of experience all kinds of markets and customers. So we've tailored certain products to different markets and tried some stuff. Some products have dropped off, some products have started up. Every year we're coming out with new products and dropping old ones. And so over 30 years, the company has seen a lot of different businesses. So it started by a guy named Alan Champagne in Legal, Alberta, and he actually started it as an upholstery company, and he was doing cow beds because he's a farmer, and the local area needed cow beds, and it was right around the time of mad cow disease, and he needed to come up with a solution for the stuffing of these cow beds where insects and infection and moisture couldn't be held. And so he started shredding used tires and using the rubber as a filler for these cow beds. He called it the crazy cow bed. And with Mad Cow coming out, he went to an agricultural trade show expecting to sell 1,000 units, and he got an order for 100,000 units. And so the business was born from there. And so the tires wasn't a conscious decision based on the environment. It was based on the fact that this is the best material for the product, and and the environment has been the benefit ever since. So we recycle between 3 and 5 million tires a year and create different products. So almost all the tires in Alberta come through our plant.
It's a private company. You both have skin in the game. If I'm correct, you and Alan are the major shareholders slash owners.
Actually, so Alan is the major shareholder owner, and I'm just becoming a partner. I'm in the process of becoming a partner now. So yeah, privately held, no investors, um, and everything's been built on cash flow. Like I said, there's about 40 employees in two different countries. We've got 80,000 square foot facility in Canada, 15,000 square foot in Texas, which we just opened. And that's been done with cash flow over 30 years, which is kind of a remarkable feat. So kudos to Alan for that.
And the premise of the business, in simple terms, is to take recycled tires and recycle them, put them, transfer them into reusable products in a variety of forms.
Yeah, so like I said, it started accidentally with rubber being the best material to use for the product, but there's all kinds of other benefits to recycling tires, and there's a real tire issue in the world right now. The push towards electric cars uh, is, I think, unconsciously creating a tire issue. The electric cars, because of their weight, use twice as many tires as every other car. And a lot of used tires now are being burned for heat and energy. Um, in Europe, they ship all the used tires to Africa. And with the kind of global consciousness around the environment, governments are mandating against burning used tires. And so there's a solution needed, especially with the push towards electric cars. So there's a growing problem of used tires, and something's got to be done. So like I said, we in Alberta recycle between 3 and 5 million tires a year, but we now have a partner in Norway that wants to do a joint venture on a plant over there because Europe's got a real tire issue. And then in the US, there's demand to use recycled products and sustainable goods in infrastructure projects. As part of Biden's Build Back Better plan, they actually mandated a certain amount of infrastructure products have to use recycled materials. So that fits perfectly within our wheelhouse. And so we opened a plant in Texas because our newest and best product is a sound barrier wall that we create out of recycled tires. So most sound barrier walls that you see around the world are concrete. We've made one that looks like stone, but it's actually made out of rubber. And it's a great product because if it gets spray painted, you can power wash the spray paint off. We've got videos on our website of hurricanes hitting it, and it flexes with the wind and it's undamaged. And of course the sustainable benefits, but also the sound attenuation benefits. So noise bounces off concrete, where with rubber it's absorbed. So we did a mile in Round Rock, Texas last year of this sound barrier wall. And what happened, the residents loved the product because of the sound benefits. But what happened a month or so ago was that a car ran into the wall, and instead of the driver dying or getting injured or wrecking their car, they backed their car up, wiped off the scuff from the rubber. We put the panels back in the wall. Wall's undamaged, and the driver drove away uninjured. And the municipality phoned us the next day and said, "We need more of this wall. We love it." So that's been a great innovation of ours. We've got it up in a few municipalities in Canada as well. And each panel of this fence recycles 13 tires. So depending on the height, you've got 5, 6, up to 10 panels per 8-foot section. So you can imagine when you've got a mile-long wall, how many tires are saved and put back into good use.
EcoFlex is an example of a homegrown Alberta business that follows kind of a green business model. Not all green business models make money. You've been able to create a business that actually is profitable. How have you been able to do that?
That's a good question. I think the products are just so good that the demand has been sustained over the last 30 years. The profitability varies depending on the cost of the inputs, right? So with inflation recently, we saw our electricity go up, we saw our expect glue go up, transportation go up, and so our profitability went down. But those costs are now on the downward trajectory and our profits back up again. So I think when you back up and you look over time, it's just we've become efficient in our manufacturing process. We've fine-tuned it so that we've priced our products exactly to what the market is willing to bear, and then we can just play with our inputs. As you know, we've got a few different glue manufacturers that sell to us. We've got a great relationship with Liberty Tire, who does the shredding. So I would say it's a combination of relationships, trial and error over 30 years, and just having great products that the market supports. And so even with a small company out of Alberta, the market, with no marketing presence and a very small sales force, the market loves the products. I'll give you an example. We've got some of our biggest customers is Cirque du Soleil. They love our mats because as they put up their tents around the world, they need to be able to move, but they also need a safe flooring to put down. And so they've been a repeat customer of ours. We did a couple sales to Miami Dolphin Stadium, and when they had the F1 event last year, they did a huge order for mats from us. And so what I'll tell you, Trevor, is like the scale of our sales are they're large projects that we work on. We did the Vancouver Olympics as well. So I think the fact that we're able to scale up and do these large projects efficiently, quickly, and have good cost control, we've been able to sustain the business over 30 years. Not to say COVID wasn't a challenging time, as I'm sure it was for everybody.
How many tires in total do you think the business has recycled?
Well, that's a good question. If my best guess would be around 100 million. That would be the real ballpark estimate, because it varies year to year, but it's been around 30 years, and there's been a few years like when they were doing the cow beds where the scale manufacturing was huge. We were just using so many tires. So best guess 100 million.
Which is, otherwise the tires would have been burned.
They would have been burned. And the other factor, if you look at like the ESG metrics, we have a white paper that measures our sound barrier wall, for example, versus the concrete alternative. And the carbon footprint of using rubber is 20%. In other words, 80% less than concrete. So on top of using recycled materials, we have a very low carbon footprint. And so you think about the benefits to the environment. Another one of our biggest products is mats for the oil and gas industry. We do safety walkways, swamp mats, rig mats, drilling mats. And the alternative to our rubber mats is trees. And so a wood mat uses, it's hard to measure, but quite a few trees. And it's generally used once or twice and then discarded. Well, our rubber mat, we don't have to, there's no deforestation required, and they last between 5 to 20 years. We've still got mats down on the ground after 20 years. And so aside from the low carbon footprint, the recycled material, you got to look at what the alternative would be using and the impact on the environment, and you see the benefits right there. So we check a lot of ESG boxes with our products, and municipalities and public companies love that aspect of the business.
Is there a metric you point to in terms of the amount of trees you may have prevented from being cut down if you provide the mats for each client? Do you guys track that?
We don't track it. It's a good question, though. We are in the process. We've engaged a PhD to do that study. We can do some rough numbers, but I don't want to be quoted. But I'm sure anyone who knows the rig mat business can understand how many trees are impacted. And if we measure, and we are doing that right now, but if we measure so each one of our rig mats uses 137 used tires, and we're not cutting down any trees. So we're keeping tires out of the landfill, we're keeping trees in the environment, and our products last longer as well. So the environmental benefits are very obvious. But yeah, we're fine-tuning the metrics so that we can quantify the environmental impact.
How does EcoFlex get around the problem that the product is not recurring, and that when you sell it, it is a good product, and that the customer doesn't need it again this time next year?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of our biggest challenges, actually, is our product is so good and lasts so long. You don't have a lot of repeat business because like I said, we have mats in Pennsylvania that are currently on rent to Repsol that have been rented out they're on their 6th year, and there's no replacement. So quite a bit of the rental business in the oil and gas is there's a replacement cost, and usually you discard 20 to 40% of your mats every year due to damage. Well, our mats don't get damaged. If there is any damage, they can be patched and repaired on site. And so the life of these is long. And so for companies buying them, it's a great investment because they can use them. It's an asset on the balance sheet. They can depreciate it, but the life, they can just keep reusing it and reusing it. But it is one of our challenges, because once we sell to a customer, they generally don't need to talk to us again for quite some time. Now, with growth in the oil and gas industry, you will get certain divisions reordering, but that's why one of the reasons why we're targeting municipalities is that, there's just, we could make sound barrier walls all day, every day, and never run out of projects. And so the scale is more than we could ever hope for. So if we can just get a little piece of that market, I think that, well, it's not repeat business, but it's continuing new business with those municipalities, and then it works out that way. But yeah, one of our best assets is that the product lasts forever, and it's also one of our biggest challenges. Like I said, we have mats in our yard that get driven over by equipment every day that have been there for 20 years, and you power wash them off and they look the same as the new ones we're pumping out. So it's pretty cool.
Critic would say that I want to support a green business and it all makes sense. Giving back to the environment's great, but oftentimes green products cost more. What would your response be to that in terms of pricing, and maybe there are cheaper options, or perhaps the product is the same as, say, wood alternatives?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on what products you're talking about. We have a commercial line of flooring, and residential, like patio blocks and this type of thing. Those are cheaper than the concrete alternative. Our eco wall, the sound barrier wall, is cheaper than the concrete alternative. It's more expensive than wood, but then if you measure it against the lifespan, if our eco wall lasts 10, 15, 20 years and you're replacing wood every 5 years, then it makes all kinds of sense. With the oil and gas industry, we are slightly more expensive than wood mats. However, what the companies need to look at is the cost of replacing damaged mats. So like I said, every year, 20 to 40% of those mats are discarded, damaged. And even if you're renting them, you have to pay for the ones that are damaged. That's not a cost that you have to look at with us. They don't get damaged. So when you look at the overall picture of the balance sheet, a purchase or a rental of our mats would be a little bit more expensive than wood, but when you're not having to pay for damage, and when you're looking at the lifespan being longer, it ends up being cheaper in the long run. So
EcoFlex would be an example of an alternative business model in Alberta, which is a traditionally more oil and gas based economy. How important do you think it is for the Alberta economy to have alternative businesses that are growing and thriving?
yeah, it's any diversification is important for all economies, right? And I think there's been so many challenges in the oil and gas industry, and I would say mostly from the political headwinds that we've received. And so with politics being unpredictable, I think Alberta would be smart to diversify. And you've seen some of that happen. There's some investment in healthcare, and even I've seen some Bitcoin companies start up in Edmonton, and there is some good diversification happening. There's not enough manufacturing happening. And we're one of those rare stories of actually product that is made here in Alberta. And a lot of people, when we go to trade shows or when we deal with customers, we have to explain to them, we're not importing this from China. We're not a distributor that's importing goods from China. We're making it here in Alberta. And that's important. We create a lot of jobs in a rural location, and we export Canadian goods all over the world. And I think it's a story that should be celebrated and embraced. Some of our local politicians have been very supportive. We don't receive any government funding or support in that sense, though. It's all self-funded. And so we do find it interesting when the federal government talks about sustainability and the importance of the environment, and then charges us a carbon tax on manufacturing recycled goods. So I think it's a little counterintuitive, but no, it's really important to diversify. The oil and gas sector makes up around 30% of our sales, so we really hope that it continues to thrive. But we've also spread our wings in different directions, like I said, with municipalities, with our commercial goods, so that we can sustain the ebbs and flows of oil and gas. So we built up our commercial division. We do automotive products, parking stops, curb ramps. Those are in Canadian Tire. We do patio blocks. We have a siding product for sheds, gazebos, decks that's made out of rubber. And those are in Home Hardware and UFA. And then one of our biggest sellers is equine mats. So for horses, the stables, the barns, they require a good flooring that doesn't retain moisture, keeps the bugs out. And horse people love to spoil their animals. And so we have huge sales every year to the equine industry. We love to brag that we did the Four Sixes Ranch, who's the creator, owned by the creator of Yellowstone, the TV show. So we did the equine mats in the Four Sixes Ranch, but it's been a great business for us too. And so when you talk about diversifying, we have to diversify within our own business and make sure that we can sustain ebbs and flows.
The idea is to build
And
a
that
strong Alberta with a diverse economy.
absolutely, and that's super important. But that also goes back to your question: how have you been able to maintain profitability over 30 years? And I think it's because we got a lot of lines in the water, and we didn't bet on oil and gas completely. It makes up a good portion of our business, but we have a lot of different products. So, for example, when the world shut down, we actually got busier selling our commercial products because everyone was upgrading their houses and putting in a deck and a hot tub, and they needed our mats underneath. And so it's been interesting. One year you'll have our safety walkways. Last year we had a lot of freezing and thawing and ice buildup. And so a lot of the camps, for example, a camp in Kitimat had a slip and fall and a fatality because they use wood walkways and the ice builds up and gets in the crevices and it's a safety issue. Well, we make a rubber walkway. Again, that lasts forever. And so we get orders from camps to remat their camps and they can pick these mats up and take them to the next camp. But they're on top of the environmental benefits, there's great safety benefits. They don't retain water. As soon as the sun hits them, the snow melts. And so you don't get the slip and fall incidents that you would with wood. So yeah, we spread our fingers into lots of different pies, and you just never know what's going to happen with the way the world is now. The winds change quickly, and you want to be able to adapt. And that's one of our best abilities as a small private company is we can adapt, we can build new products quickly, respond to market forces, drop products, bring on new products, and adjust.
And with products going to places like Kitimat, it's not just the Alberta economy, which you're supporting, it's BC and perhaps across Canada and into the States as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I talk about our equine mats, actually, most of our equine mats go to Ontario. We've got great distributor relationships in Ontario. But yeah, BC, we just did a huge sale to a forestry company in BC. The mat access mats are great for them to get their equipment into swampy areas and do some logging. A lot of the camps we've sold to are, we've got mining camps, forestry camps, oil and gas, all kinds of different camps. A lot of construction companies use our mats too. If you think, let's say that you needed to do a project on a golf course and you didn't want to impact the land underneath, you're going to need access mats, right? Pipeline companies. So we ship all over the world, of course, and we have a plant in Texas. We did sales in the last month to Florida, California, Montana. I would say Alberta represents maybe 25% of our sales. Most of the sales go all over the world.
To paint a picture and remind the listener, and I think employees, what was the employee count in Alberta, just to help paint the picture?
It fluctuates, but we're at about 30 employees in Alberta in a rural setting. So it's great. We got really good people. We've had people that have been with us 15 years. And it feeds, there's a few local towns that feed us, and it's been great. We haven't had too much trouble getting good people and retaining good people. So there's a lot of good workers in Alberta, a lot of
What's the
hard
biggest,
workers.
absolutely. What's the biggest opportunity for the business going forward?
Well, I talked a little bit about Norway there. We see Europe as it's got huge potential with their tire issues and the mandates, the government mandates, with them not being able to burn the tires anymore. They've got a real issue, a real problem. Australia, the same. Um, we are working on a big project in Pennsylvania that hopefully comes into fruition, where we would do a huge sound barrier wall in Pennsylvania, continue to grow in Texas. Those are sort of like the big picture targets that we're looking at. Internally, we want to get more efficient. We want to increase automation, keep our costs down, and become more efficient, greater output. We want to add another heavy industrial press. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it's a cool story.
Mhm.
Alan Champagne, that founded the company, when he decided he wanted to get into heavy industrial mats, he needed a press that was large enough to accommodate that. And a lot of the smaller presses on the market wouldn't do. And he ended up finding a press in Houston that NASA used to create heat shields for the rockets. And they were using it for ceramic heat shields. But him and his friend went down there, and it's a £1 million press. It's 2 stories tall. And NASA laughed at him and said, "You'll never be able to get this out of the building." And a couple of farmers in 3 days had it taken apart. And the thing was so heavy, they had to build a rail line out of the building and ship it by rail up. And then he had a rail line built into his yard, uh, where the press still sits now today. But it's pretty cool. It says NASA right on there, and it was part of history, an important part of history. And to this day, it's still our best press. We have probably 25 presses. This one's the best. We're looking to duplicate that so we can scale up our industrial division, but it's kind of a neat history there.
On the flip side, what worries you? What keeps you up at night? What's the biggest challenge for the business?
At the moment, inflation. Um, and coupled with that, I would say, is the political headwinds. In Alberta, we faced a lot of variables from Ottawa that I think has brought some unpredictability to the market. We're not an oil and gas business, but everybody in Alberta survives and thrives when oil and gas is doing well. And that's presented a challenge. And then, inflation. When I talk about us shipping goods all over the world, trucking, shipping, freight is a big part of our business. And when those costs go up, it's challenging. Our electricity on an 80,000 square foot manufacturing facility, when they throw the carbon tax on there, that becomes very challenging. So these are some of keeping our costs under control has been a challenge, especially with the supply chain dynamics through COVID, some of the political forces with the carbon tax. Those are our biggest challenges. And you can't always just pass it on to the end consumer. The market will pay what the market will pay, and they don't care if your electricity bill doubles because of carbon tax. You've got to find a way to do it. And so we're responding with automation and trying to find efficiencies and trying to reach more globally into new markets. But that'll always be a challenge in manufacturing, the cost variables.
As a green business that is contributing back to the environment, what would your response be to issues like the carbon tax and additional taxes trying to address the environmental concerns? Would you say that they've been a hindrance, or what would your messaging be back to the federal government?
Well, I don't want to get too political, but our emissions haven't been reduced since the carbon tax was introduced. So to me, we're not having the right targeted approach. Like I said, we're a manufacturing company recycling up to 5 million tires a year, and we're paying a carbon tax, but yet our end product represents a lower carbon footprint than the alternatives. I think we're the type of company, I think if the environment is incredibly important and we want to reduce emissions, and responsible governance is important, but you have to have a more targeted approach. So to me, I think you're better served looking at the environment saying, well, this product represents a better alternative, has a lower carbon footprint. So rather than charging a carbon tax to this company, maybe we should encourage municipalities to use this type of product. And in doing so, we're actually lowering the emissions on the environment. We're lowering the carbon footprint. So while their intentions might be good with the carbon tax, you're making it harder for us to recycle material and reduce the carbon footprint. So I think a more targeted approach rather than a wide sweeping carbon tax that increases the cost of shipping, thereby increasing the cost of groceries, the cost of everything. It doesn't seem to be working. Our emissions haven't been lowered. But sustainability, ESG, these are all really important things. I think they have changed the direction of corporate governance for the better. People are starting to think about more responsible leadership. So that's a great thing. And there's a great, I'm glad that the corporate environment and the governments are encouraging companies to be more responsible, because it encourages them to end up buying our products. I think we've been the beneficiary of the US mandating recycled goods and infrastructure products. So we're quite happy that they're pushing responsibility and for the environment. But it also in other ways presents challenges, like I said, with carbon tax, supply chain issues. So I think a more targeted approach rather than wide sweeping would be better.
Well, I think that's a great summary of Eco-Flecx and the business and what you guys contribute to the environment. Before we wrap things up, also quick shout out to Mike Rutherford at Rundle Eco Services, who connected us, also an example of a green business model in Alberta.
Absolutely. Say hi to Mike. He's a great partner of ours. He's a distributor of our products. Great guy too.
And if the listener wanted to learn more about Eco-Flecx, where could they find you guys?
Eco-Flex.com is the website. We're all over social media. We've got a great little marketing team. They're very easy to find. Lots of interesting videos on there. So hit up our website, check us out. Really exciting story. Like I said, 30 years of history, and some of our customers have just been, like I said, the F1 event in Miami, phenomenal venue for us to be a part of.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate it.
All right.